Hello and welcome to the Gaggle What We Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. Peter, we're all trying to figure out, like Egyptian specialists, reading hieroglyphics and trying to understand what these hieroglyphics mean.
Very apt
Exactly.
analogy.
We're trying to figure out what it is Donald Trump intends to do about the war in Ukraine, because he's given a number of interviews in recent days. He gave a long interview on Meet the Press, and then he gave a long interview to Time magazine that named him once again Person of the Year. Um, and he also sent out a couple of tweets over the past week, and we're all trying to read what is it that he is saying. And of course, the problem is that he remains very ambiguous, and therefore everybody has something to gnaw on. So you have the people who are convinced that Trump is going to just pull the plug on Ukraine. They can point to certain things that he said, which indicates that that's what he intends to do. And of course, those who think, no, he's going to stick to the course set by Biden and by NATO, they can read certain things there. So it's very difficult to figure this out. And then you have to say Trump is really quite a master at obfuscating. I mean, it's amazing how he acquired this talent to obfuscate.
Or he's just a big tease, okay? And
Maybe
he has no idea what he's going to do. I mean, again, we've been over this territory before, and because we've been over this territory before, we should have better insight, but we don't. Is he playing five-dimensional chess? Or he doesn't have a freaking clue on what he's doing?
it's very.
Either, either one, you can make a compelling case.
You can make a compelling case. So let's just look at a few of the examples um, of what he has actually said. So here he is. This is the truth that he sent out last week, and we just talked about this last week. He said Assad is gone. He has fled his country. His protector, Russia, led by Vladimir Putin, was not interested in protecting him any longer. There was no reason for Russia to be there in the first place. They lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine, where close to 600,000 Russian soldiers lay wounded or dead in a war that should never have started and could go on forever. So when he says and could go on forever, that already think, well, I thought you were going to end it within 24 hours. And this has been your promise. And now you're saying, well, it could go on forever. So that, already we're kind of scratching our heads, trying to figure out, well, what does he mean and could go on forever?
And at least the way you and I read it, and most people in this space read it, why is he invoking Russiagate?
Exactly. Russia. It's so strange.
It's very strange. And they lost all interest in Syria because of Ukraine. Well, that is not a proposition that you can actually test. It's far more complicated than that. We're close to 600,000 Russian troops. I don't know where he got that number
He
from.
may have got it from American. I mean, look, he's getting briefed by the Biden
Yeah, okay,
administration, so
yeah.
he may well be getting this is the numbers they're giving him.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Um, and Russia and Iran are in a weakened state right now. One because of Ukraine and a bad economy. The other because of Israel and his fighting success. Then he says, likewise, Zelensky and Ukraine would like to make a deal and stop the madness. So now, right away, I mean, what does it mean? Likewise, like what? Where's the likewise? Ukraine would like to make a deal and stop the madness. Is that true? Does Zelensky and Ukraine want to make a deal? Well, maybe, but not. It's not a deal
But, but
that would be acceptable to Russia.
yeah, but is that the Zelensky victory plan? Is that
Exactly. What does he mean? Like, I mean, that's why. Likewise, likewise, what? What's the
one of the rudiments of the English language, everyone, is parallel structure. There's
right?
no parallel structure here.
Exactly. Where's the likewise? Zelensky and Ukraine would like to make a deal and stop the madness. They have ridiculously lost 400,000 soldiers and many more civilians. there should be an immediate ceasefire and negotiations should begin. So this is one of the obviously Trump's supporters, or the advocates for peace in Ukraine, they seize on this and says there should be an immediate ceasefire and negotiations should begin, because that's obviously going much beyond anything NATO is saying and much beyond anything the Biden administration is saying, because they are not calling for an immediate ceasefire and they are not calling for negotiations. In fact, they eschew any kind of negotiations. So that's okay. Well, that sounds good. But then what does it mean by likewise Zelensky and Ukraine would like to make a deal? Now, I mean, maybe he talks to Zelensky and Zelensky says to him, I want to make a deal. I said, oh, great, he wants to make a deal. I mean, I don't know how else does he get to reach that conclusion that I want to make Zelensky wants to make a deal.
Well,
Uh,
maybe they're talking about a completely different deal. Okay.
Maybe, yeah,
We have these minerals I hear you're interested in.
right. Like,
I mean, it's just as a sidebar here. I don't know if you noticed, George, over the last month or so, 6 weeks, um, those that are cooling on the whole Ukraine project. Well, but after all, Zelensky's English isn't very good. I'm sure you've come across that. It's like kind of massaging, the position that they have
right.
here. We all know what the Zelensky plan is. Burrell and Callas is her name now.
Kaya Kallas, yes.
Yeah, she's finally on board. God bless her soul.
Yes.
We all know what that is. Is it something that Trump wasn't aware of? Where that's unclear.
But it's very interesting though when you say the deal, because Zelensky is probably briefed and he knows Trump. He says the way to talk to Trump is talk about business opportunities. How you can make money in Ukraine. Because otherwise he looks at Ukraine, he says, oh, this is really depressing. He'll just say, oh, so many people are getting killed, I'm getting depressed now. But if you say, hey, there's all sorts of opportunities here for American businesses, they can come in and extract all these rich mineral resources.
And you could build the largest Trump Tower in Donetsk.
Right, exactly. That's talking Trump's language. That's like, hey, yeah, well, this isn't a bad idea. Where we could go in, build a big Trump Tower, and we can get our hands on these mineral resources. This is make America great again. This is America first. So that may well be something along those lines that they're talking. And that's not a bad way to get to Trump. If you say, hey, which side do you want to come down on? He said, well, you can make a lot of money in Ukraine, or at least American businesses, he himself, but American businesses can make a lot of money in Ukraine. And that's why Lindsey Graham was the one who started this whole thing about how much money there is to be made in Ukraine. And again, Lindsey Graham knows how Trump thinks.
And let's keep in mind, everyone, and it doesn't always make the top paragraph or even in an article at all, is that, there are companies like BlackRock that have already invested
Yep.
huge amounts of money. And this is the pressure that remember the grain deals, everyone,
Right.
off and on.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of very powerful agri businesses that are involved in Ukraine. Of course, what they've done to Ukraine is what they tried to do, well, succeeded in doing in Russia in the 1990s, is strip
Right.
the place. Okay.
Yes.
And so Ukraine is, allowed itself to go naked with its
Right.
assets. And
Right.
people like BlackRock can say, hey, we got some money in there. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Okay.
Right.
And that is a pressure
That is a pressure. Exactly. You got
it's
to
not democracy and
right. Yeah. You got to protect our investments. You got to protect them. Too many lives are being so needlessly wasted, too many families destroyed, and if it keeps going, it can turn into something much bigger and far worse. I know Vladimir well. This is the time to act. China can help. The world is waiting.
China can help.
Yeah, China can, but notice again, I know Vladimir well. This is the time to act. So then people read that. Look, he's saying Zelensky is amenable to an agreement, but it's Putin who's holding things up. This is the time to act. So Russia needs to act to whatever, come to an agreement.
But if they haven't been approached, how can they react?
Well, we don't know. I mean, he's obviously spoken to Putin on the phone. I mean, as we'll look at some of these comments later, which suggest that he has spoken to Putin, but that doesn't really mean very much. I do think that Russia's not going to show him the back of their hand. I mean, then they're going to go along with Trump. Trump's going to come up with a plan, and Russia will not just turn it down. They will have to play along with it because if you turn it down, that's just going to antagonize Trump, and I don't think Russia wants to do that. So they're going to have to play along with it.
Well, I think okay. I'll add nuance to that. Okay, Trump is the ball is in his court, so he has to propose something. Everyone's waiting for that, and the way Soviet statecraft and Russian statecraft, they'll say, well, it's very interesting. Let's talk about this and that. But we need to throw in this. And what the Russians, I think, will say, I think George is absolutely right. They're not going to say no. They're going to say, well, let's talk about this. And then one missing piece is this, and we need to talk about that. We need something holistic here. I think that's how it will proceed.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's what will happen. Um,
Nobody at this point in time, everyone knows my sensibilities about this and George's sensibilities. So keep that in mind. No one should go down the path of saying absolutely no right now. If this is an opening and it should be exploited by all interested parties, okay?
right. No, that's exactly right. I think it will be, and I think they will go along with it, and but then they'll put in as you say all sorts of provisos and demands and so on. For this has to be taken care of, that has to be taken care of, and then we'll see how Trump and the Americans react.
One thing we know absolutely certain here, and it's very important to keep in mind. Trump wants a win. Now, will it be his win or it will be the Russians' win? Whatever we can interpret it, we'll interpret it to the end of time. But if in Trump's mind that he has a win and he's a winner, that's going to count. That's going to count a lot.
It's going to count a lot, but the problem is, of course, is that what will count for him as a win? Because if he gets accused all across the board, including very much within his own Republican Party, among the Republican supporters, hey, you've sold out Ukraine. That's going to count with Trump. Trump. I don't think Trump is going to withstand the kind of huge pressure that he will come under if it seems like here's a deal. Oh, you've betrayed Ukraine. You've betrayed NATO. You've betrayed the West. You've betrayed our values. I think Trump would succumb to that kind of pressure. He's not a Nixon-like figure. He's not a Pat
Okay,
Buchanan who I think would have.
yeah, okay. You took my wind out of the sails. Okay. You're right, George, but this is something that one of the motifs of this podcast from day one is we talk about leadership qualities and leadership weaknesses.
Right.
Trump is going to have to show enormous amount of strength if he's going to get a win that he understands is a win.
Yeah.
Everyone is Russia looking for a win. I would never phrase it that way, and I don't think that's how they look at it. They need security. Now, that is a very different angle in looking at this, and that's one of the problems any kind of negotiations is going to come up against because the Russians are going to say, we want security. Now, if Russia gets security and Trump can say, and we got to win,
right.
I can live with that. And because
right. No, I think that's right. And I think if they made a pitch like that to Trump about security, we want a global conference and something like the Helsinki 2.0, whatever like that. And Trump might go for that. Trump will say, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. Yeah, we'll have a big conference. That's when he'll come under a lot of pressure, and including pressure from within NATO. They're all going to start screaming at him. We don't want no stinking conference. Again, he's going to have to start withstand the huge pressure. We know he didn't. He had right instincts in his first term. When he met Putin in Helsinki, this was very unpopular. He came under a lot of attack for meeting Putin in Helsinki, and in the first few hours after that meeting, Trump seemed very amenable and said, we can work together on mutual issues with Russia. And then the pressure on him just became overwhelming, and then he just backed away from all the commitments he made in Helsinki.
That's why I go back to the quality of leadership.
Right.
Okay. And I know this is hard for the Russia haters and all of that. There is a way for a win-win. There is. Now, neither side will get 100% of what they want, but there'll be peace. And I think that should be the approach. Unfortunately, in this atmosphere, I don't think there's enough in the West. There's enough bold people,
Right.
people of integrity that can approach it that way.
Right. No, that's right.
And it's plus, it's a grift, and it's hard to say goodbye to that.
No, yeah, no,
Okay.
no, no
Hey,
question.
look, Zelensky has every reason in the world actually to keep this going as long as possible. I
Right.
mean, he's got his loot probably abroad. He's probably got an airplane fueled up on the tarmac 24/7. He's going to he's going to run this as long as he possibly can. And when the grift comes to an end, he's going to hop on that plane, okay? And his cronies, if they don't kill him first.
Right. 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 Well, I think that's quite a way down the road. So
Well, considering what happened to Syria,
yeah, that's true. But that was Syria. I'm not sure. Again, I'm
get
not sure
you.
NATO will exactly just abandon.
I really just I don't put a lot of stock into that, George. I'm sorry. I just don't. These
What,
people
what stock?
in NATO and these NATO people.
Well, look, NATO
Okay, you
has
take
kept, yeah,
over the war. You want it? It's yours. Take
okay,
it.
but that's exactly what NATO has said. Yeah, we want
Okay,
this
go
war.
ahead.
We want this
George,
war
within a
because
matter.
it's good for us, and I mean, we've barely broken a sweat. No NATO people have been killed, so why not?
No, George, a lot of sweat is happening in the EU right now. I mean, even their special. I've never even heard of this guy. Their special Ukraine guy came out and spoke about how unprepared they are, and when it comes to munitions and military preparedness. I think it's a bluff, and
I don't.
I
I
think
really, this is
let
where
me
we
finish.
disagree. I think that, yeah,
Let
yeah.
me finish. These pygmies in NATO, they're working the phones in Washington to with the Republican establishment, with the Democrats. They're going to use a lot of domestic pressure, and these people in Washington will use NATO. But NATO in itself, I'm sorry, just not impressed. Okay.
I'm not impressed, but the point is that all they need to do is to keep this war going, and this they're committed to doing. All basically
And
they're throwing a lot more money into it. They're
let
throwing
them
a
do
lot a
it.
lot of munitions, and of course they say, "Oh, Russia's doing this, Russia's doing that, and we're falling behind." The reason they say that is to encourage the NATO governments to cough up more money. I mean, that's the way you do it. Oh boy,
Yeah, but it's
we
not
don't
working, George.
money, Russia's going to they're going to roll over Ukraine. They're going to roll over Europe. That's the
If
argument. I mean,
if if Trump
that's why they're doing this.
if Trump has an idea, and oh look, let's go a level higher here. I'm sorry, I just don't take NATO seriously. George can disagree with me. That's okay. The way this is going to be resolved, George, is between Washington and Moscow. It's not going to be Brussels, okay? And the Europeans will dutifully fall in order, okay? You and I have seen this ever since the start of the special military operation. So I don't see things any different. I see governments under pressure in the European Union,
What
people
pressure? What
more.
pressure are they under?
What? Macron's government fails, the German
Not because
government,
of this.
partly because of budgetary
Oh, a
concerns.
budget, yeah, that's
Of
budget,
course
but
it
it's not.
is.
It's not.
Of
It's
course
not.
it
It's
is.
not costing them so much. Germany is
You,
going to have a new government.
everybody, this is one of the fundamental differences that George and I have. Okay,
Right.
it
Yeah.
goes all the way back to the beginning. Okay,
Yes.
you can agree to disagree, but I see your
Right.
point.
Okay.
Respect it.
All right. So anyway, let's go on with Trump. He says this is the Time magazine interview.
George, every time there's the person of the year, it reminds me that Time is still in business.
I know. I always think that I have to say I don't like the formulation person of the year. I think man of the year had a certain resonance. And I know, oh well, it's man, going to women. Then call her woman of the year. But at least when you say he is man of the year, that used to mean something. But person
Yeah,
of the year sounds weird. It's weird to refer to anyone as just a person. And but it used to have to say much more interesting because they used to. I mean, I think Stalin won Man of the Year, I think twice.
Hitler got two or three
Yeah, I
times.
think Hitler also got it twice. But where they got into real difficulties when people didn't like that, didn't that hey, you can't go around saying somebody Man of the Year who we find abhorrent, and so they called Khomeini Man of the Year. I think it was 78. I think it was, and that just caused such an uproar among Time readers that from then on they never made uh, person of the year anyone whom many people find abhorrent, even
Yeah.
though they were clearly in terms of the impact on the news was, that's Man of the Year. I mean, that he has the biggest impact on the news.
You know who I would have? I disagree. I think Elon Musk probably should have gotten it. Um, I think, and for a lot of different reasons. Okay. I mean, he's surprised us all over ever since he's purchased Twitter. Okay, and now he has this bromance with Trump. Is that still going on?
I think so.
Um, has he moved out of Mar-a-Lago yet?
I don't know. I think it's still there. He always seems to be around.
I just think it's hilarious. I mean, did you see that picture? So who was it? It was Trump Jr., RFK Jr., Elon Musk. They're on a plane. They're eating McDonald's, watching Robert F. Kennedy Jr. eating McDonald's like
Yes.
blows your mind. Okay. And guess who's like this, hanging over the seat right behind Elon? It's Speaker
Just
Johnson.
Speaker Johnson. Yeah. No,
Such a
that's always very
hilarious
fun. Yeah.
picture.
The one I like along those lines is when they went to, I think, the ultimate fighting competition, and Trump walked in, and there was RFK Jr. with him, and Trump was walking with what's his name? Is it White, Sandy White, or
Yeah,
Sandy?
yeah, yeah, yeah. The guy, right? Yeah.
The guy, the UFC guy. So it was already,
White for sure. White for sure. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. And then they Dana White, yeah,
Dana White.
Dana White, and then there was um uh was it Joe Rogan, and then Trump hugged Joe Rogan. So it was a real tough guy gathering.
Manosphere.
And there was
Manosphere.
Mike Johnson. He
Yeah,
looked
but see,
so
but
out of
see,
place in this among all these tough guys.
but the picture they're on the airplane, when you think about it logically, there's only one person there that has elected power, and it was Mike Johnson, who's on the periphery.
Right.
You know. Okay, we're going far afield.
Yeah,
Keep it.
that's right. Anyway, so here's the Time magazine. He asked him, if Ukraine doesn't agree to a peace deal that you have said you will broker, will you cut military, humanitarian, and intelligence assistance to them? So that's the question. That's always the question. Are you going to push Ukraine under the bus? They always ask that. And then Trump says, the reason I don't like to tell you this is that as a negotiator, when I sit down and talk to some very brilliant young people, young, compared to me, you're very young. But when I talk to people, when I start, I think I have a very good plan to help. But when I start exposing that plan, it becomes almost a worthless plan. So that isn't an answer. He was asked a very specific question, and he didn't answer that question.
We're further from, we're moving away, not getting closer to
Not
someone.
getting closer to why preoccupied with being young. Anyway, then he goes, and then the question: will you commit to protecting Ukrainian sovereignty, though from Russia? And then he says, well, I would like to see Ukraine. Okay, ready? You have to go back a little bit further. It would never have happened if I were president. Would never have happened. He really doesn't want to answer these questions. Um, and then it says, but it has happened. So the question people want to know is, would you abandon Ukraine? It makes it so bad. And I had a meeting recently with a group of people from the government where they come in and brief me, and I'm not speaking out of turn. The numbers of dead soldiers that have been killed in the last month are numbers that are suggesting both Russians and Ukrainians, and the amounts are fairly equal. I know they like to say they weren't, but only they're fairly equal. But the numbers of dead young soldiers lying on fields all over the place are staggering. It's crazy what's taking place. It's crazy. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. So that was, people say, oh well, that's very good. And he said
Hey,
that because
everybody, get your yellow marker out. Okay. Okay. So this is the third question, right, George?
yep.
Okay. So get your yellow marker and put I disagree very vehemently. I guess can you be very vehemently? But anyway,
It doesn't sound good because vehemently is already a very strong word. So yeah,
right. And vehemently was sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. That's what you should highlight.
right,
That's the only thing so far we have gotten from this interview. Keep going.
right. That's right. That's it. So he starts talking about this, the killings, and you expect him to say, so many people are dead. We really shouldn't be talking about abandoning Ukraine. We should just be talking about peace. That's where it seems like the logic of what he's saying. That's where he's heading. And then he suddenly veers off and says, "Well, I think it was a really bad idea. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia." And that's not, Mike Waltz has not said that. Mike Waltz has generally been supportive, as was Keith Kellogg. Kellogg was just saying, oh, it should have been done earlier. The usual kind of quibbling, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I don't like it, but it should have been done earlier. Um, and why are we doing that? We're just escalating this war and making it worse. So, okay.
Highlight
Um,
highlight that. Good.
That's right. That should not have been allowed to be done. Now they're doing not only missiles, but they're doing other types of weapons. And I think that's a very big mistake, very big mistake. But the number of people dying is number one, not sustainable. And I'm talking on both sides. It's really an advantage to both sides to get things done. So
So out of two sentences so far.
So exactly that's exactly it. And so of course, obviously, those who want to bring this war to an end have seized on this and say, "Hey, look, he just said unambiguously." One of the few American politicians who has said unambiguously, other than maybe Thomas Massey or Rand Paul, but everyone else has gone along with what Biden has been doing. Say, no, this is a really really bad idea. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Anyway, then the question that many Americans and many people around the world have is, will you abandon Ukraine? It's the third time he's asked that question. I want to reach an agreement, and the only way you're going to reach an agreement is not to abandon. You understand what that means, right?
I would say, would you elaborate, Mr. President?
Well, that's what he said. He says, right. Well, no, tell me. Well, I just said it. You can't reach an agreement if you abandon, in my opinion. And I disagree with the whole thing because it should never have happened. Putin would never have invaded Ukraine if I were president for numerous reasons. Number one, they drove up the oil price. When they drove up the oil price, they made it a profit-making situation for him. The oil price should have been driven down. If it were driven down, you wouldn't have had it. It wouldn't have started for pure economic reasons. But when it hits 80, 85, and $90 a barrel, I mean, he made a lot of money. I'm not saying it's a good thing because he's also suffered, but they are moving forward. This is a war this is a tragedy. This is a death that's far greater than anyone knows. When the real numbers come out, you're going to see numbers that you're not going to believe. Now, the thing about this is he really hasn't said anything. I mean, it's like, he's been asked the question over and over again. He just simply, parried every question. And you could go on like this for hours on end, and he's still not going to answer the question.
Because he doesn't know, George. He doesn't know.
I think so. I mean, he doesn't know, but he also, look, he's become quite skilled at parrying questions. Just he can go off on his rambles and just run out the clock. I mean, sooner or later the interviewer says, "Well, I can't go on asking this question because there are other questions I need to get to." So that's it. And he's got good at this. I mean, he's been doing this for many years. So he's become good at running out the clock.
Okay, everybody, just as a sidebar, the price of oil had nothing to do with this.
No, of course not. No. And then, so now this is the interview that he gave to NBC News.
Oh, this is the woman. If you ever watch it,
Mhm.
she looks like she's just had way too much coffee. Then her eyes are really, really beady. Okay, it's kind of spooky. Okay, I mean, too much caffeine in that lady. Okay. It's
Right,
called, this is from Meet the Press, but
right.
as Aaron Mate and Katie Helper call it, the Meet the Depressed. Okay. So let's go. That's
Kristen
really,
Walker. Okay, let's turn to foreign policy. Should Ukraine prepare for less aid from the United States after you're sworn in?
ooh.
President-elect Trump, possibly. And then President Trump, yeah, probably sure. And then Kristen Walker, you said that you can end the war in 24. We're in, and then Trump goes, well, we're in for 350 billion, and Europe is in for 100 billion. Why isn't Europe in for the same amount as us? So he says, hints there, yeah, we can cut back on aid to Ukraine, but then he says, yeah, because the Europeans are going to cough up a lot more money. So in a way, there's not going to be any reduction of aid for Ukraine. It's just that Americans we're going to be focusing on other things. Why isn't Europe in the same as us? The one thing that should happen is that Europe should come in for they should equalize. And Biden, all he had to do, like I did with NATO, I said, you've got to pay your bills. They weren't paying their bills. And as you know, the Secretary General said President Trump got 600 billion, no, 640 to be exact. And I used the 400 billion number. He corrected me. He said, no, you actually got 641 billion. This is Stoltenberg. He's always quoting Stoltenberg in his support. Because I said, you have to pay your bills. We were paying for NATO. And you know why I got the money? Because I asked for it. It wasn't that complicated. Europe is in for a fraction, and war with Russia is more important for Europe than it is for us. It's important for everybody, but it's more important for Europe than it is for us. We have a little thing called an ocean between us. So there's nothing peacenik about this. He's just saying the Europeans have got to cough up a lot more money. And he says, but it's important, and war with Russia is more important for Europe than it is for us. Where I thought you wanted to end the war with Russia. I mean, I thought that was your thing,
And this is this shifting responsibility. So it's like, well, the Europeans don't want to support it. Why should we support it? See, that's one out he's looking for.
It's one out, but he's essentially saying that's the language I use with Europe because Europe then succumbs to my cajoling, and that's what they've always done. They say, I told them we're not going to do it, and then when I told them that, they coughed up the money. So he's saying this is my negotiating ploy with Europe. I threatened to withdraw, and then they come up with the money. That he's boasting about how he got all this money out of uh, NATO, and he's clearly threatening to do the same now. And then he says, "A war with Russia is more important for Europe than it is for us. It's important for everybody." But what does it mean important? I mean, isn't it something that you want to end? There's not, you want to end it, and whether it's important or it's not important, you want to end it.
Well,
Um,
I mean, this is a preamble. Well, my hands were tied, or they call themselves allies, but are they? I mean, I don't think it's going to cut the mustard, okay? But I mean, he's looking for a way out,
yeah,
obviously.
I don't know that he is. I think he's looking for a way to get the Europeans to pay a lot more. I mean, I think that's what he's doing. It's just I don't see any evidence. I know people say this. I don't see evidence that Trump really wants out. I mean, in general terms, yes, he wants peace and so on, but that he's serious about
Yeah, but,
withdrawing American support from Ukraine,
yeah,
I
but
don't see
George
the evidence for it.
wrote to the NATO General Secretary. What he said, the European countries should be on a Cold War footing,
Yeah,
starting. Well, okay, George. Well, even if every single parliament did that, we're talking about a massive mobilization. It's going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. It's not going, we're looking at a 5-year plan. I mean, this
yes,
is something that is not 5 weeks or 5 months. I mean, you have to start building these plants.
yes.
I mean, this is a lot of it is from scratch. I mean, most of the NATO countries, I mean, they cleaned out their inventories and their warehouses. Okay, I mean,
Right, but
they
they
never.
can they can they can make this again. But
Yeah, at great cost and
yeah,
it
all
takes a
right,
lot
okay.
of
It's
time,
a yeah,
and also the disadvantage, and this is a disadvantage that they have always had. okay, they have a common agriculture policy because that's a really important political issue for so many countries. But they haven't had a common defense policy. They still don't.
No,
Okay. When,
no.
we're looking at the here and now. What George and I are looking at right now, I think it's fair to say we should look at 6-month intervals.
No,
Okay.
no, no, no.
Let
No.
me finish my point. Let me finish my point. Okay. Between now and the and summer, we could have some kind of resolution one way or another. Okay. But for NATO, if it's going to be um, trying to achieve parity with Russia in defense spending and procurement, that's not going to happen in 6 months, George.
Well, it does. It's not the question of the procurement. I mean, look, NATO is providing the weapons. Russians are dying. So it's not an equation that particularly is unfavorable to NATO. And that's why there hasn't been any really
But
serious,
George, but George,
no, let me finish. I mean, there hasn't been any serious moves within Europe to bring this to an end. I mean, yeah, we have Germany, and Germany is the powerhouse here. Scholz is going to be replaced by somebody who's even more hawkish than Scholz. Macron is still making the foreign policy decisions for
okay, George,
France.
so, how many tanks does Germany make a year? You
Well,
know?
all right, but they've managed. Well, they've managed to.
How do
They
they?
well, however many tanks. I mean, they have managed to keep this war going for 3 years. Something that nobody really thought that they could do, but
So
they
you
managed
think
to keep it
NATO
going
can?
for three
You
years.
think NATO, under its current circumstances, is going to be able to do it for another 3 years?
Maybe.
I doubt it
I,
very much.
Look, these are the biggest, most powerful economies in the world.
And they're
Um,
not
and
geared for war.
they've kept me out. But then,
They're not.
we were saying all this. People were saying all this in March, April of 2022. Oh, NATO doesn't have anything. NATO will never, we heard this from McGregor and so on. But they have, and they've done it. And there's no serious movement within Europe to say, this is it. We can't do this anymore.
How
Let's
much of
cut a
the
deal with
military
Russia.
hard? I think most of the hardwares come from the United States, George. Yes?
Okay, there's a lot of hardware that's come from the United States,
Okay,
but
so
there's no again.
Italy sent 12 trucks.
Okay,
Okay, all
okay,
right.
but it's still enough to keep it going. I mean, it's like, yeah, 12 trucks. But according to that argument, then the war would have been lost. They haven't lost the war, and therefore they're keeping it going. And so, and every time they do this, we say, oh well, yeah, but the war will be lost
Well, George,
next
all I
three
can
months, next
say,
6 months. But it
we
hasn't
could go,
happened yet. So
we
that's
could
why
go on.
to say that this is going to happen
We
is
could
just
go
purely
on.
speculative. And I don't see the point of being speculative at this rate.
Well, you are being speculative.
I'm not speculative.
Three
I'm
years
going by
ago,
the
but
fact
that
that
is
they kept. No,
speculation.
I'm not. No, I said
That's speculation.
no. It's not speculation. I said they kept it going for 3 years, even
Yes.
though all of the experts said that it's going to be over within a few months, in fact, a few weeks, and it hasn't over. So
Well,
now they're saying, oh yeah, but now it's going to be within a few months. And I'm saying, well,
no,
the track record suggests that they've been able to keep it going for a long time, and we shouldn't assume that they're not going to be able to keep it going for
George, then
another year or two.
you've misinterpreted me or intentionally misinterpreted me
No,
because
I'm not missing. I'm
okay,
just
now
sticking with the argument.
let me finish.
Okay.
The reason why I said the next 6 months is not because of capacity. It has nothing to do with capacity on either side. The next 6 months, the whole point of this conversation, by the way, is Trump's
Yeah.
peace plan.
Yeah. No,
That's all I'm
yeah.
talking about. I think we have like a window,
Yeah.
arbitrary,
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree.
arbitrary.
Yeah.
And then if it comes to failure, which I think it will, personally, okay, and then we're going to have to see what is next, okay? I have a lot less faith in NATO than you do, okay? But maybe that can be earned, okay?
Right.
But they're going to really have to scramble, and like World War II. I mean, look what the United States was able to do in a year. I
Yeah.
mean, unbelievable in one year. Okay. Look what the Soviet Union was able to do. Unbelievable. And
Right.
even Nazi Germany,
Right.
unbelievable. But this was total
Right.
existential.
But
Okay.
that's
And
exactly. No, I agree with that. But when you look at the resources on the two sides, then the resources of NATO far exceed the resources of Russia. Now, of
I
course,
disagree
that
with
does
you.
depend on NATO mobilization.
I disagree with you. I mean, if is it going to be a war of baby food? Yeah, the EU can do the baby food. Okay, can they do diapers? They probably can do diapers.
I think
Can they
that
do tanks? Can they do
I
tanks?
think if you
I
can
don't think so. I
I
just
think
don't.
if you can produce tractors, if you can produce trucks, if you can produce all kinds of things and
And
ammunition and
George,
whatever,
and
you can do
you
it.
believe there's
Trains and all the, yeah,
you
you can do it.
believe that there's the political will in Europe to have this happen.
I haven't seen any serious challenge to that political will. The political will has been there. All of the consensus within Europe has been in favor of keeping this war going. We've talked many times about Viktor Orban and Robert Fico, and they haven't made any real impact. They haven't, we'll see in Germany, whatever. But so
I
far,
think
I would
if,
say that they haven't made a serious impact.
I think that if you were to use a scale where the needle is neutral and going this side, pro continuing the war against Russia, or this way start slacking off and change position. I think it's definitely going in this
No,
direction.
where's the evidence for it? I mean,
You're
we had
talking
elected.
about no, you're talking about the clowns that meet at
Yeah,
Brussels at the
yes,
headquarters of NATO. I'm talking about voting patterns, looking at austerity through Europe.
yeah.
Every single European election you and I have discussed. It may not be the top issue, but it is an issue,
It is an
okay? And
issue.
it cannot be ignored.
It's an issue, and despite the fact that this terrible war that's been going on for 3 years, despite all of that, the war party wins almost all the elections. Yeah, you can have these very populists on the left and populists on the right, and you got, you got the AFD and you've got Sarah Wagenknecht, but they're not really making any huge impact. They probably reached their zenith. You got the
Maybe.
Viktor Orban. You've got Robert Fico. Now there was this guy in Romania, and this guy in Romania was very moderate. He wasn't even saying we're going to withdraw from NATO or anything like that. But it was enough to just cancel him, and he's not going to be taking part in the next election. That's pretty sure. I'm just saying that that the resources that they have, if they're serious about keeping it going, they'll keep it going. And I don't see any evidence so far
Without the
that
United States,
there's a real movement
without the
to
United
bring this
States,
thing to an end.
without the United States.
If the United States pulls out, I agree. If the United States decides to pull up stumps and leave, then Europe will, of course, abandon the whole thing.
Okay,
But
then
then, but there, that's where I
we
don't
don't
think.
need to go any further on
All
this.
right, if the United States does it, but we're going through these, with a fine tooth comb. We're going through these statements by Trump, and there is nothing here to suggest that Trump is
I
on
don't think
the
that
brink of abandoning Ukraine.
I don't think anyone in NATO world, I don't think Trump, I don't think any of them really have any idea how to move forward except for the bluster. And Russia cannot be allowed to win all that. That's the only thing they have here.
Right.
It's a really bad situation. Again, arbitrary benchmark. I'm going to look with Trump coming into office. I'm going to give 3 to 6 months, if he maybe even just 3 months, and then it'll just be back to business as usual. And then I
Yeah,
think that that'll be an agreement.
yeah, I agree.
Everyone, I want Trump to succeed. I want this thing to come to an end. I just don't think he has a
Sure.
clue.
Well,
I don't think
I agree. I mean,
people he's surrounded him with are clueless people.
right. No, that's exactly right. And I think that, Trump was sounding, when he was running for office, he was sounding very much like a peace now. I mean, he was absolutely saying we need peace. The neocons have led us, to these disastrous wars. This is absolutely crazy. We need to end it. But that's when he was seeking the party nomination.
Right.
Then once he got the nomination, he really has just been, being ambiguous, parrying these sort of questions, and but he hasn't sounded at all like a man on a mission determined to bring this war to an end. He can do it. He can do it right now and sound like he sounded about a year ago. He's not doing it.
No, and I think it's a fair assumption to make. He's probably putting a little bit of heat on his Ukraine guys. Like, I really need a policy, guys. I really, really need it now. Okay,
Right.
because
Right.
time is of the essence. One thing, this is my own personal take on it. I think Trump really, really wants to somehow get this resolved because he has a domestic agenda that George and I have said many times, others have said, he's got an 18-month window to create his legacy. And I just can't see him wanting to talk about what? Donbass? Is it spelled with
Right,
an X or
that,
double?
that's it's yeah, but that's easier said than done. Yeah, I want to focus on
Yeah.
domestic, but you've got this whole thing, and you've got this vast, enormous, military, security, intelligence, media apparat that is heavily committed to Ukraine. You can't just turn around and say, I'm just tired of all this. Focus. Again, Nixon, it took Nixon 4 years to bring the American involvement in Vietnam to an end. And that was 4 years, and that was the time when Americans were getting killed. So there was a great deal of pressure because people were getting upset. The young Americans were getting killed, and even so, it took him 4 years. But in this case, you say, hey, why would I want to take this enormous political risks of ending it when there's no real pressure on me? Yeah, I'd like to get it done, but I can, he can just say, yeah, I'm kind of working on it. Yeah,
But
I'm working on it.
but there's this caveat, Jordan. You're absolutely your logic is flawless, but there's a big problem here. What happens when Ukraine loses?
Well, if that is that certainly is a problem. If but I
A big
but it
problem.
depends on what one means by that. I mean, if what
Good
Ukraine
point.
loses, I mean, if Russia pushes them out of the Donbass, if they push them out of Kherson and Zaporozhye, if that happens, okay, then maybe they'll do a deal, but it's still not a great deal for Russia because Russia's problems will still remain. But that would be a way of bringing it to an end. However,
Well,
that would still be a problem for Russia because you're gonna have this crazed regime in Kiev. NATO will be absolutely pouring in arms into that crazed regime in Kiev for the next round.
everybody, you heard it here, and I will take great umbrage if we are not credited with the following. Russia is not looking for the Idlib solution.
Right.
Okay? No Idlib solution. That would be a strategic defeat for Russia.
That would be a strategic defeat, and that's really the big problem, because these people, because regime change should always have been the goal in Ukraine. So long as you've got these people in power, then NATO is going to be there, and therefore Russia's problems will remain. I mean that's that it was always about having a regime in Kiev that was willing to work with Russia and willing to be cooperative with Russia, something like they used to have, but they don't have anymore. Anyway, all right. So Kristen Walker goes back and says, you said you can end the war in 24 hours. You've even said you want to try and end it before you're sworn into office. President-elect Trump, well, I'm trying to. I'm trying to end it if I can. You're actively trying? I am. Have you talked to President Putin? No, I have not. You haven't talked to President Putin? No, I have not. Um, since you've been elected? I mean, no, well, I don't want to say that, but I haven't spoken to him recently.
Ooh.
So you've spoken to President Putin since you've been elected? I don't want to say that. I don't want to say anything about that because I don't want to do anything that could impede the negotiation.
Well, I mean, I'm really truly astonished because this woman's acting like a journalist. I didn't expect it.
But you're right. She's hyper. Now that you mentioned it, that is quite striking about her. She um, and then Kristen Walker. But I want to stop. Have talked about. Let me tell you what the other world leaders. This is like something from Harold Pinter. We're reading.
NBC, I think you should be very concerned about copyright of your IP here because somebody's going to put this into a sitcom.
Yeah, that's right. It's yeah. And then President-elect Trump, I've talked about, let me tell you, there are people being killed in that war at levels that nobody's ever seen before. You have to go back to the Second World War, and even that, if you take a look, and you know what it is, it's the soldiers largely. The cities have been emptied out and demolished. The country has been demolished. If I won that election, which you know how I feel about it, I won't get into it because we don't need to start that argument. I think it's an easy argument. It was really proven even more conclusively by the win that I had on this one. But now the thing is, it goes on about these how terrible this war is and so on, which of course it is. But it's quite striking how people like Trump and others they have no compassion at all for how devastating the war in Gaza has been. So oh, the people are dead and all this destruction and so on. Okay, but when it comes to Gaza, well, Netanyahu has got to finish the job. Bibi has to finish the job. I say, so that doesn't matter. You can wreck this place, destroy, but all in the name of finishing the job, whatever that may mean.
Very good point, George.
Um, and and then Crystal, but you did go. Had I could some, and you didn't.
I
Yeah,
had
well,
court. I had court. What was that?
yeah. Was it? Where's it?
What's that?
Had I courts? But you did go to courts. So I don't know what that
I
is.
don't
Yeah.
either, but it sounds funny.
Yes. And well, yeah, well, that's your opinion, but I disagree with it. Had I assumed control, number one, Israel wouldn't have happened. Number two, Ukraine would have never happened. It would have never happened, Ukraine, Russia, but the number of people that are being killed, soldiers, young, beautiful soldiers, hundreds of thousands of people being killed. And it's very interesting. It's level, totally level. The battlefield's totally level. You know what's happening. The only thing that stops a bullet, you know what it is? It's a body, a human body. And the people that are being killed, hundreds of thousands on both sides. Russia's probably lost probably 500,000. It was 600,000. Now it's about 500,000. It just comes up with these numbers, out of thin air. And then she says it's devastating. And then Ukraine's lost higher than they say, probably 400,000. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of bodies laying all over the fields. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, and it should never have been allowed to happen. Biden should have been able to stop it. Um, so, will the United States stay in NATO while you're in office? In where? NATO. Do you commit that the United States will remain a member of NATO while you're in office? Again, they have to pay their bills. If they pay their bills, absolutely. But not if they don't pay their bills, she asked. But NATO's taking advantage of us because we were, look, number one, they take advantages of us on trade, meaning the European nations. Okay, it's like terrible. They don't take our cars. They don't take our food product. They don't take anything. It's a disgrace. And on top of that, we defend them. So it's a double whammy. So let me just tell you, I was able to get hundreds of billions of dollars put into NATO just by a tough attitude. I said to the countries, I'm not going to protect you unless you pay. And they started paying. And that amounted to more than 600 billion. That's a big thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be fighting. They wouldn't have any money left to fight. If they're paying their bills, and I think they're doing they're treating us fairly, the answer is absolutely, I'd stay with NATO. I find this very, very peculiar argument. I mean, he's always doing this, and I guess he thinks, hey, this is like being like a businessman, but it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, if you're talking about you're an America First person, then your main concern should be, is being a member of this military alliance a good idea for American security? I mean, that's your first concern, not whether they're coming up with the money, they're paying the rent, or they're not paying the rent. I mean, but
Well,
he always makes this argument. It doesn't seem at all a plausible argument.
well, I think in an odd way, is trying to he's trying to appeal or appease his MAGA following and saying, look, we're going to pay only as much as everybody else. That's only fair. I think he's pitching it to MAGA. And it's kind of a tepid argument in my mind, okay? Because a lot of MAGA people just say, cut it off. Okay. I mean, there's some excruciating stories I've come across of the hurricanes of a few months ago. People are still living in tents, Joe.
Right.
Right. And that's what people are saying is that Biden's still. I can't even keep up with the numbers anymore, to be
Right.
honest with you. Okay, and I think that's what Trump is trying to appease is that if we're going to pay and we're equal members or equal responsibility for this alliance, we're going to pay our fair share like everyone else. And I think that's just kind of a I think it's kind of a cheesy argument, but I
I
think
think
that's
it's a very cheesy argument. It's a very weak argument because yeah, America can come up with money if
yeah,
need
they just
be.
print it. They just
Yeah,
print it.
exactly. They can just print it. That's what America always does. The real question is, which you again he was raising a year ago, is is this alliance leading us to disaster? That was the point he was making then. Hey, these neocons are dragging us into wars. Is NATO dragging you into a war? So there are times when he seems to understand, hey, this really wasn't a very good idea, provoking Russia. NATO expansion was kind of provoked Russia. That wasn't a good idea. But it's in the inherent nature of NATO to provoke conflicts to which it's the answer, and that's why it's a parasite, and it's a very dangerous parasite because it's actually going to eventually kill you. Because it's going to get you into a devastating suicidal war, and he seems aware of it when he talks about Biden is authorizing deep strikes within Russian territory.
The very existence of the way NATO is set up is inherently destabilizing. Okay, and this is the result is this conflict in Ukraine. If that isn't addressed,
Yes.
and yeah, I can remember making this argument in another podcast, and with some very smart people, by the way, and they all kind of nodding their head and smiling and say, "Yeah, of course, Peter, you have the solution. You'll get a Nobel Prize for it." But nobody in Washington is going to go for it.
Right. But that's it. And then, it's like he occasionally seems to see NATO is getting you into every single conflict since the end of the
Well,
Cold War.
remember, it was during his watch when Macedonia was brought in. And he was
Oh,
just
yes.
like, "What?" And then somebody pointed out to him that New York has more police officers. New York City has more police officers than the Macedonian army.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
and
right.
he's like,
Yeah, yeah, that's
Why? We're in for them too."
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah. That you're right. That was it. When was it? He was. I think he was interviewed by Tucker, and he was talking about Montenegro, who had just been inducted into NATO, and said, "Yeah, that's could be dangerous." He says, the Montenegrins, they're very aggressive. They've been waging wars against their neighbors. We could get dragged into a war on behalf of the Montenegrins.
you go back to the times of Homer. Yeah, that's one of these things. You've hit upon it a number of times already here. It's that there's like these kind of flickers of light that he
Right,
actually sees. It's like
right,
he sees what's really going on, and
right.
then doctors
And then it just
talk to him.
yeah. That's really the problem with Trump. He's not an intellectual. I mean, he's a guy who works on his instincts. I mean, he's instinctive, but that also means he tends to get influenced by whomever he's with. So he's not like Pat Buchanan. I mean, Pat Buchanan, who blazed the trail for Trump, Buchanan was an intellectual. I mean, he had thought about these things. He'd written books about it, so he knew what he was talking about. Trump has taken over Buchanan's ideas, but he hasn't really thought them through. That's why he has these occasional flickerings, and then we get back into darkness.
Yeah, Pat Buchanan was the engine, and no, I'm sorry, Pat Buchanan's ideas were an engine, but he filled out with a chassis and
Right,
with seats and with a steering wheel.
right.
Trump is just on top of the engine,
Yes,
okay?
yes,
And if you don't have the proper applications to
right,
use that engine, it
right.
doesn't go anywhere.
No, no, that's right. I mean, that's in a way that's the problem. Trump had something Buchanan didn't have. I mean, Trump has a personal charisma. Buchanan never had that, and that's why he didn't have a he wasn't able to relate to people. He just didn't have a public appeal.
What
Trump has
happened
that.
to? Has he gone like into retirement? Because I haven't
I think
heard.
so. He's quite old. I think he's in his mid or late 80s now. So, but he doesn't write anymore. So I think it's.
I have to say, it's someone that I had to this day, enormous amount of admiration for. And George is right; he was the trailblazer for all of this, and he paid a very high political cost for it as well.
Right.
The American Conservative, the website, That was his
Yep.
brainchild.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And very unfashionable at the time.
Yes.
Very.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
his last few months of writing, I got the feeling he'd lost the plot. But
I don't think he was writing those by then. I think it was somebody else was writing the columns in his name, and then he just sort of stopped. He stopped. So I haven't heard anything more about him. I don't know if his condition, his health condition, or whatever. But there are people now urging Trump to give Buchanan a Presidential Medal of Freedom before he dies. So I think he should do that. I think
I do
Buchanan does
too.
deserve
I
a
do too.
Presidential Medal of Freedom. Anyway, Kristen, welcome. But if not, you would, this is about NATO. If not, you would consider the possibility of getting out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
The most the most apolitician answer you can ever give. Okay. Buckle up and brace for impact, everybody. We got 4 more. You got 4 more years of this.
That's
Okay.
right. That's right.
I mean, she must have been like, no, because it's this one of these pieties. I mean, I was on a podcast recently, and I in my usual style, went on a drumbeat against NATO, and the guest said, "I'm a resident of a NATO country. Could you rephrase the question?"
Rephrase.
It would be they're fearful that I said, okay, yeah, we you can phrase the question and you can answer it
Right.
yourself. I
Right.
mean, these are pieties that you cannot question.
Right.
You know?
That's right.
I mean, George and I are pretty flippant about it.
Right.
Okay, but in a lot of places, you got to be careful what you say.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, what was it? What, was that Facebook or Twitter that said that?
Oh, it was Twitter.
Twitter. Yeah. That.
You have to have reverence,
That's right.
reverence,
Exactly. NATO's on
reverence.
the side of good. And therefore that's and yeah, there's no question, and that's the attitude that people like Kristen Walker have, and throughout cable, Fox, the NATO is just, we're the good guys, they're the
Yeah, but
people.
George, do you have any sense that they know the history of
No,
NATO?
no,
They
not
have
not
any,
not at all.
like, what is Article 1? What is Article
Yeah,
4?
no, not at
Do you
all.
think any of them have any knowledge of that at
No,
all? It's
no.
easy to do. Just type it in.
Right,
Mr. Google will tell you. But
right.
have they read any of these things here? Or the Budapest memorandum? Has anybody actually read it?
No,
Okay.
no.
Ukraine gave up its nukes. You hear that all the time, even from
I don't.
people.
Exactly. From people who should know better, they spout this sort of nonsense. No, I mean they people don't know anything about NATO. They don't know. Hey, NATO preceded the Warsaw Pact by 6 years. It started in the 49. It was called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, but for some reason, Greece and Turkey were inducted very early on. Again, before even the Warsaw Pact came into existence, but already they brought in Greece and Turkey. What has any of that got to North? And how are any of these countries in any danger from the Soviet Union? How does Belgium get to be in any kind of threat from the Soviet Union?
Well,
So
what threat does Russia today
yeah,
threaten opposed to NATO?
that's right.
What?
Right. That's right. Exactly. That's the point. They're never able to answer because nobody ever asked that question. It's just self-evident, So when Stoltenberg talks, well, it's about values. Oh yeah. That's it. It's about
Okay.
values.
But they are.
Exactly. What are these
I
values?
mean, there was a presidential candidate that was just deleted in Romania. Is that your values?
They're part of your values. Yes, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Moldova, an aspirant, denied
This,
the
this,
franchise to hundreds of thousands of people. That's your values?
that's right. They stole it outright. I mean, it was just so
Or then,
blatant.
or in Georgia,
Yes, yes.
okay. The current president, the French woman, I think it expires today,
I think tomorrow.
tomorrow. Okay. But she said she isn't going to leave. But if
That's
you
right.
look at Western media, they say Parliament installed
Yes,
some kind of football player.
that's
Okay.
right. That's right.
But no, you see, this is again, George and I are always very sensitive to this. He was elected by the parliament by using their own rules. So why would you say installed?
Yes,
Actually, this French president, this French woman, she was installed as far as I'm concerned.
right,
Okay.
right,
I mean, the words count. Okay.
right.
And so when you hear values, grab your wallet, grab your coat, and leave the room.
It's very interesting because this woman, Salome Zorabichvili, a French woman posing as a Georgian, yes, she's declared that she's the only authority that's legitimate in Georgia, just arbitrarily. It's not, I'm the only one who has any legitimate authority, and says she's not going anywhere. And the media coverage is very interesting because they only interview her. They only ever go to her, and she says, "Yeah, I'm, I have legitimacy." And the people who had just run for office, the parliament that's just been elected after an election, they have no legitimacy. I'm the only one who has legitimate. And then they all everyone, oh yeah, yeah, and Russia. And then she said, "Oh, it's all Russia, Russian interference." No one asks her, well, where's your proof that Russia had anything to do with anything? And I haven't heard anything from any of these people from the Georgian Dream Party. I haven't heard anything to say that they're pro-Russian. I mean, that's what have they ever said that suggests that they're pro-Russian? Even their policies, what in their policies is pro-Russian? What are they doing? Just one thing that they're doing that's pro-Russian. But you don't do that. So the media just simply dub them, oh, pro-Russian. And she's pro-EU. She's pro-Western. Oh, so she's the good person.
Well, I read an article. I'll leave the source to the side right now, but they're looking at the challenges that the EU and NATO face in Georgia and Moldova, and even in Romania, that is a member of both. And I was reading the article. I was going to send it to you, but I didn't want to waste your time. Is that the only thing? It was all a critique of these people fighting for democracy and all the barriers. But every single example the writer brought up is anti-democratic on the part of the authorities, and it was just sometimes I would like to just have a master class of just, give a printout to everyone and then, have it not have it landscape. So you have the paragraphs here in blank, and let's all go through and correct this. Okay, I'm getting our blank side correct. Circle that online. No, this is anti-democratic.
Right.
We could do George and I do it all the time. Okay. And because most people are taught not to question, and if it's written down, must be true, huh? But I mean, these people are getting more and more sloppy. They're getting more and more hysterical. That's why there's more and more censorship. And just because Trump is going to come into office, don't think that the censorship is going to come to an end. In Europe, it's only going to get worse.
I absolutely agree.
And because of the Zionist influence of the U.S. government, they will attack free speech, and it may not necessarily be about Ukraine. It could include Ukraine because this coming years, something I want to talk about with George later. But things are coming to a head. Okay, and when you're on the losing side, you're going to start saying it was your fault, and it was your fault. It couldn't have been me. Of course. Oh, I have my ideals were pure. Okay, that's going to be a very
no. I agree, and I think it's very interesting. It's a way of manipulating language, which of course is what propaganda does very well, which is that you call something by the exact opposite of what it is. So therefore, when you have a democratic election and it results in an outcome you don't like, you call that an attack on democracy. So what happened in Georgia, the victory by Georgian Dream, that was an attack on democracy. Those of us who are demanding a rerun of an election, because we lost, so we'll have a rerun. That's in favor of democracy. That's pro-democracy, rather than, hey, you're a sore loser and you want to redo the election minus the candidates that you got beaten by. So you call that. And so just like when you said about this free speech, I think the Trump Justice Department will go after universities that somehow tolerate anti-Israeli speech. And they'll say, that's in favor of free speech. We're doing this because we want to promote free speech. Not, hey, free speech has gone too far. They're not going to say, no, free speech. Go, no, we're trying to promote free speech. We're for free speech. It's they, the people who are speaking out. They're the enemies of free speech.
Absolutely. All right. If you have any idea what Trump's Ukraine policy is, please leave a comment. Okay. We're open to all takers, all interpretations. Okay.
Yes.
On a more serious, I don't think it fits The team that Trump has assembled, they're not up to the task, not even close.
Right.
Okay, they're relying upon old pieties. We have to figure out how to defeat Russia, and then we'll
Right.
have peace. See,
That's right.
that.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right.
All right, everybody, this is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals. Go to the gaggle.locals.com. Today is Sunday. George and I will reconvene for our live stream at 10 a.m. Eastern
Eastern
Time.
time, 10 a.m. Eastern time for our live stream tomorrow, Monday. And then on Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, I do my solo. And in the meantime, we have to think about these ferocious hounds who are just simply saying, we keep shaking this tip jar and we don't hear any noise. The more we shake, it's kind of the sound of emptiness. So, there you have this, exactly, very, very distraught. So, in order to calm them down a little bit, please chip in whatever you can, because we need to calm them down. It's bad enough, they have to tolerate this winter in Moscow, but an empty tip jar that kind of tips them over the edge. So, we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we're going to get our hands around the problem of the dogs. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.